Welcome to the Outer Realm with Michelle DeRoche and Amelia Pisano. Airing live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans.
Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. We are pre-recording today. Technically, we're live, but we're doing it very quietly. But we are pre-recording for our amazing show this evening, and it will be broadcasting via international, or should I say, United Public Radio Network, International Public Radio, 105.3 FM from New Orleans. We are fully sponsored by the amazing folks over at Folgers Coffee. So thank you, Folgers. You make all of this possible. Also, a big thank you to Dr. Snick, aka Justin Snicker, the Sonic Surgeon, for his contribution to the show of our intro and outro. You can find him basically on any platform that has like phenomenal music, which is all the popular Spotify, iTunes, Amazon, etc., etc. So thank you for that. Tonight, you guys are all going to be seeing for the first time, and we for the first time in a few minutes, Charles Christian. And he's going to be sharing with us all his weird tales of the UK. It's just so close coming up to, the whole St. Patrick's Day thing, because of course Ireland is part of the UK. So I think it's just perfect timing. Anyway, tonight you're going to be able to catch it on all of our 8 platforms, which is going to be all the usual Facebook pages, Outer Realm, Canada's Most Haunted, United Public Radio, Joe Montaldo, UFO Undercover, News on the Flip Side. And it's going to be on International Public Radio, YouTube, and of course, UFO Paranormal. So please head over and catch us there. Amelia and I are going to be live in chat tonight. I know it's always so much fun. So we're going to interact with all of you guys there. But while you're over at UFO Paranormal on YouTube, please don't just subscribe, become a member. There's a lot of really good content going on that is not available to the public. We try to do something really special for members only. So please, consider doing that. But now we're gonna get on with the show.
Yeah, so gotta adjust the camera. I'm trying to pull it without making anything obvious. And sorry guys, I'm not used to like functioning. I'm not used to functioning during the day, so forgive me. Much better. Yeah, yes, we're not used to seeing our sets during the day. Sets. This is my office, but I'm trying to turn it because I don't want the glare of the window in our. So you've got my holy side on this side.
Because the lighting is just, we have it set up to go at night, but it is really difficult for our guests on the other side of the pond. So
understandably so. I'm going to be honest. I've declined shows at midnight. So I can't imagine doing a show at 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. That would just be insanity. Even though I'm awake.
12 a.m. to 4 a.m. I've done that.
And I've turned that down. So the next one I'm on, she airs at midnight, but we're pre-recording as well because she's being very kind to me.
Right.
And I'm really happy about that. I don't mind doing it. It's just,
yeah. It's always nice when you can have some flexibility. So this is what basically we're doing we have quite a few guests coming up from the other side of the world, and pre-recording is always, the best option for them. But you guys get Amelia and I in chat, and we always end up having a lot of fun. And I'll still be posting up the comments and stuff because it's still going to be live again. And obviously it records all over again. Yes. So it's going to be all with your comments, and we're going to have a lot of fun. We always have a lot of fun. But I love, he's just having a struggle today. I love the tales that come out of the United Kingdom. I find, when it comes to like hauntings or any weird things. I think a lot of it
They're
just,
the best.
they were the first for so much. Like, you remember some of the real popular, without naming, some of the more popular paranormal shows started off in England, and it, it gave the world a taste of, whoa, this is a thing. This is great. Not like we all didn't know it, but they were the first really, to go public with it and such. And I thought, this is right on. I like it. And having visited myself and having experiences there, I thought,
I'm cool. Definitely going, and I'm going to take up, I'm going to make sure that, and I hope you're coming with me, that we do meet Hamilton and Caul in person, even though I've been sending them different website links to entice them over this way, because it would be so much easier, because I have no intentions of flying anywhere for a while. Right. But yeah, so that's not something we can talk about on this show, but
especially on the other side of the world right now, it's a little bit chaotic. I don't really want to be in the air.
I don't want to be anywhere in the air near that part of the world. And it's definitely that. It's not the C word.
There's, we're in the middle of a war. It's
definitely that, like, I was supposed to take a trip to Africa years ago, and then they had that whole I'm just going to say political thing because I don't want to say anything and then YouTube pulls it off because I said it wrong. Right. And I didn't make it. And I have no intentions of rescheduling that trip because of the fear that it instilled in me then. Because I think about, what if you get stuck there,
That's a big one. That is a big one. Yeah. For me, it's, I love to travel, and I've a lot of places I still want to travel to, but I also believe in timing, and I just don't think the timing is right. I'll leave that right there. And maybe one day, sooner rather than later, it will be. But right now, I'm content to stay in my own little world.
Me too.
Reaching out to, millions of people like every single week, and we feel like you're all family. And, because you see us say and do pretty ridiculous things. So obviously,
set up the show while we're on it. Right? See, like this. Like this. Set up the damn show while I'm on it.
There we go. See?
Amelia, the light's missing.
We don't just say it. We actually mean it. We live it. So, but what we'll do is send, we're going to send our guest an invite. So do you want to go over his bio?
Yes.
And then we'll get the show started, because I'm really looking forward to this.
I love his bio. And I a lot of times I will take a bio and I will rewrite it myself for the show, but I couldn't think of a better way to put this out there for the audience to get to know him, because he wrote it so well. Right. Charles Christian is an English barrister and Reuters correspondent turned writer, podcaster, award-winning tech journalist, and sometime, get this, werewolf hunter. He now writes, talks, and makes videos mainly about folklore, urban myths, history, and the weird. So I guess I'm in one of those because I'm a weirdo. Yes, an English street newspaper once did commission him to go on a werewolf hunt on the night of a full moon. This is where England is just far supersedes our side of the world, I'm telling you. Spoiler alert, he didn't have one, or the werewolf didn't find him. He was born a chime child with a caul, so according to legend, cannot drown at sea, but can see and talk to ghosts and fairy folk without fear of coming to harm, allegedly. I love his wit.
I love it.
And I'm really looking forward to speaking with him today.
Yeah, I did I've already sent him the whole invite, so I am hoping now that we're going to be able to get him through and see what's going on, because this is all interesting. So there we go. It's been sent.
Yay.
I want to make sure. Yep, it did in fact send. So I mean, come on. When you think of England, I think pagans, I think druids, I think fairy folk, I think there's so many anomalies.
Power spots.
Everything. Banshees.
It's not just the Ripper.
Oh, geez, no. I think, again, the power spots. I think just paranormal.
I think culture,
it's so
too.
old.
And culture, the culture.
All of it. There's so much to talk about. Even when visiting, it was just like, you don't know what to see first. You're going through parts of England and Europe where cities are built upon cities, and the spirits there, the residual energy that compounds onto itself, to me is fascinating. And then you have all of these power spots that amplify so much activity also. I mean, some of the best stuff comes out of England, seriously, like, so it's going to be
werewolf, right? The werewolf isn't that one of the places? I mean, we've seen the movies, The Werewolf of London, and
well, the werewolf comes in, like, there have been, if you go to Romania, for example, in Brasov, they have a tradition that on every full moon, wolves come down from the mountain into the courtyard.
Wow.
So I couldn't be in two places at one time. Like, do I wait for it or do I go to the haunted forest?
You've told that story. That's right.
It is. It's really wild. So I think this is just something that, again, we fall into cryptids, and do we find that are they ETs? Are they time travelers? Are they dimensional? Like, do they just slip in and out of portals? I don't know. I'm there's a lot involved in all that, but
yeah, definitely. It's really cool. And we don't often have anyone who comes on and can say that they were commissioned to do an investigation for werewolves on a full moon. So
I think that's
pretty special.
That's actually very intriguing. And I'd be curious to see where he starts. I've sort of left it open-ended because I don't want to do, typically I don't want it like a guideline per se, like some of the other shows, because I just, we like our guests just to feel comfortable and go whichever direction they want to go. It keeps everything very unique. And that for me is like outstanding. But all I know is there's like phenomenal stories that come out of the UK, and
there is.
It's going to be fascinating. So you just look at, even I love his little bit, which makes it really enticing. Like, if you're fascinated by the weird, the unexplained, and the bizarre, join author Charles Christian on a fascinating road trip around what he calls the Wold Newton Triangle. So I never knew about the Wold Newton Triangle.
Only a writer could put it that way, right? So,
where all events have occurred unmatched anywhere else in Britain. He will talk about werewolves, zombies, vampires, green-skinned fairy folk, almost sounds like Greys, headless ghosts, screaming skulls, no less, ancient warlords, and a Parkin-eating dragon, and so much more. See, I love the dragons. The UK is full of stories of dragons.
I love them too.
Oh, I do. I've always loved dragons. And people are like, oh, what is that? I know it's a big freaking reptilian. Maybe we need to rethink about where dragons.
I don't know. I wonder if reptilians are like what you call a spin-off off of a rom-com. But
maybe.
A really nasty joke.
Hello.
Hi. How are you?
Hi there.
How are you?
Fine, thank you. I'm fine, thank you.
Good. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Now, what time is it over there for you right now?
Well, it's 12 minutes past 5. I say it's this strange time where for 2 weeks we're out of sync. So
that's right.
America is technically 1 hour closer to Europe for this 2 weeks.
I know. We were going over emails. So is that 5 for me? I'm like, all I can say is you're 5 hours ahead of us technically, but let's just check it out when we get started. So
wow, I forgot all about the time change on Sunday. That would interfere. Because 2 weeks later, even Europe, Italy as well, it's for 2 weeks right now. They're 7 hours ahead of us right now for 2 weeks.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. And we get the same. I think we get the same for about 1 week in the fall as well.
Right.
Although, are you going off daylight saving time now?
I believe so.
Well, we've just switched over last weekend. So a few days ago. So we're still caught in the daylight savings time. And it's strange because not everybody, if you go to the United States, part of it actually doesn't convert at all.
No, actually, they just passed it yesterday. That's why I didn't mean to interrupt you. They just passed it yesterday in the Senate in United States that they are going to just ixnay, that whole fall. They're just keeping it as standard, and usually Canada follows suit right after, because we do so much business with them. So it just makes things easier on the border. But yeah, we'll probably do the same thing. Right now we have this crisis called a war going on that we're assisting in. So it's been really hard for our parliament to sit down and talk about that. And, you know, this little V thing that's going around the world for the last 2 years as well. So I don't know. I guess they have more people in Senate in the States that they can concentrate on something like that. But Canadians don't have that kind of time. Our parliament is small.
Apparently.
No.
One specifically doesn't want to address
One
any
specifically
of it.
doesn't have time for anything unless it's a camera. But we will mention him or his pink shorts.
Our pretty boy who heads
you tell
up
I didn't vote for
helm.
him, can you?
Right. But I've really been looking forward to having you on. You know, I've got friends and family in the UK. I love it. And just reading over the bio, and obviously, you know, you have that little niche at the top that says, if you're fascinated by the weird and unexplained, you had me at that. Just like, yeah, vampires, werewolves, zombies. So, I mean, what I like to do typically is start off with humble beginnings, and just to try to figure out, like, you know, did you have personal experiences as a child or a young man? Like, what led you to this point? Because it's so vast, but it's so fascinating. What brought you to this part of your journey?
I suppose it was, I grew up in the north of England in a town on the coast, and the house I grew up in was very, very old, right on the harbour side. And the back part of the house was medieval, and the front part was Georgian. So we're going way, way back. Wow. And it was a very, very spooky house because so much had been added onto it, and because in the past it had been used by smugglers. There were odd little passages that just went nowhere, and there were walls that sort of swung back to reveal a kitchen that was lurking down there.
That's exciting.
See, it's great. You think a kid would love that, but most kids would be terrified.
Well, I was down, you know, me and my mates, we'd be down there exploring.
Oh, that's a great place to play hide and seek and win.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, we also had lofts at the attic space at the top.
Right.
And they were also very spooky. And indeed, one of my mother's friends, who was a spiritual medium, she said she could hear the sound of people in large boots walking across this room. Wow. And it turned out that my great grandmother on my father's side, she used to allow fishermen from other ports who were trapped in the harbor because of bad weather to stay there. Wow. And they would have had big, long sea boots, as they did in, you know, we're talking the end of the 19th century. They would have clumped around there.
Yeah, certainly would have.
Amelia mentioned the hide and seek. And one occasion, I was still very small, but my parents were having a Christmas party, and as they did in those days, we're talking the 1950s, people used to play party games, and they actually played hide and seek. And somebody went up into the loft and jumped on the bed and thought there was somebody, there was a bed up there, and thought there was somebody hiding under the sheet, and said, "Got you." And then discovered that this body, it was a woman's body, but it had no legs or arms or head. And so she had a big screaming fit. But it turned out it was my grandmother's dressmaking dummy. That,
oh my God.
You know, there's a shape to have the abdomen of a woman, but nothing else. So you can fit it. And that had just been laid there, on there, covered up, out of the way to keep the dust, and say this poor woman had gone there. There's a decapitated corpse.
Funny. That is so funny. That would be startling, though, right? Like that would be startling.
You know, in a gloomy place. And
my goodness.
You feel your way around There's no head.
Oh, just the gift that keeps on giving.
I would love to live in that house. I'm just saying.
No kidding.
I would be happier than a pig in mud. Like, oh my gosh.
No, I think it's great. I mean, I think people don't realize the history. Like this house is, it's haunted and it's 1872. That's old for this part of the world. You don't realize when you get over to England and parts of Europe. I mean, it's really old. I think some of the oldest buildings in the UK go back to the 800s that are actually still functional, don't they? Like, they really go back.
They go back. I mean, I now live in a part of England called East Anglia. That's the bit that sticks out on the East Coast.
Yes.
And that has a huge number of pre-Norman churches. So these are churches that were built before 1066.
Oh,
and
my gosh.
A lot of them are still in use as places of worship, every day, well, at least every week. And they just stay there. And you do find with old properties as well that bits get added on and bits get added on. And I say we did extensive building work on my parents' home at one point and took down some wall coverings, and you could see there were the beams in the walls, and the walls were 3 feet thick, and you were going back to the 1200s or so, and it's just been bits stuck on it.
When you did that kind of work where you were restoring and renovating, did you find more activity in the house or no change at all?
No, it had been changed around a lot, and the parts of it had been completely demolished and rebuilt. So in the end, there's not a lot of the old left there in it. And I say it was one of those properties that was let and then sublet, and different bits were leased out and changed, and it became a commercial property. My parents had a shop. The property surrounding us, that had been part of the same house, was a cafe and restaurant. So it was all changed and modernized, and really, I think, wiped away the traces of what had been there, which does happen. I mean, if you sort of take that view that ghosts and the like are almost a form of like a video image, I think it's sometimes called a stone tape theory,
that, just residual leftover
residual in the brickwork and so on. And if you change it too much, you destroy it, and it's gone. It goes a bit like you treat an old-fashioned videotape badly. Eventually, there's nothing there, just interference.
That's true. That's true. And it really does take away from the theory. People make assumptions that just because it's very old, that it's automatically haunted. I think there's more imprints, leftover energy than anything else. Not everything has a ghost, even though it looks like it may.
Yeah. Well, I think it's fair that if we take the view that the ghost is some form of psychic imprint, the ghost must have had a reason for doing that psychic imprint, which is why where there's been murders, things of that nature, because there's nothing more traumatic than being murdered.
Absolutely.
And things of that nature would do it. And if there were deaths in the house, that would do it. But of course, in modern times, most people now don't die in their own homes. They die in a hospital or a hospice. Those things have gone, which is probably why the houses that are being built today may never have ghosts, because there's never been events in there of that nature.
Yeah.
And, it must wear out after time. I mean, as somebody else once pointed out, how come we don't see ghosts of cavemen or people from tens of thousands of years ago? Maybe they were, but they faded away with time.
Yeah,
that's a great point.
I would agree with that. I also believe that we leave our own imprints. Like, let's say if you get into an argument with your significant other or a friend in one room, you just like, put out that high powered energy, and you walk out and you come back a couple of hours later, that energy still sort of sits there. It takes a while to dissipate, and then you kind of wonder why you're feeling a little bit of angst and feeling a little foul. Maybe just I find myself just sort of cleansing it out. Really helps, or replacing it with better vibrations or better energy. So playing some music or something like that. I think over time, is it possible that with everybody, because especially building that old, it's changed hands, it's done so many things, there's been a blend of so many different types of energy. Do you think that would contribute to dissipating it, or do you think it's more that it's played itself out so many times that it's phased out?
I think in terms of big traumatic events, they probably do play out over time. But again, I think, yes, the point you're making is very good, that there are so much, if you like, minor vibrations taking place.
Yes.
Again, I suppose, bit like the old-fashioned roll film cameras, where you got double exposure if you didn't wind it on. And if you keep taking the same picture over and over again of different things, just the same thing, in the end, it's just going to be a blur. And that's probably what it is. There's just, it buries it out there. But
it's fascinating when you think about it. Like,
it's a great analogy.
Being logical about it. A lot of people aren't always logical about it, but I think you just try to get past the excitement of, did I just catch something, whether it's logical or not.
But the excitement and the experience, I believe.
Absolutely. Some people wait their whole lives for it, never have it. So, and
then others have it constantly.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, exactly. You do wonder, because I know some people like that, and nothing ever normal happens. It's always something else. And you think, what is the statistical chance that you just see endless ghosts after strange occurrences? Is it perhaps your imagination?
No, not if it's people that have passed on. It's really hard to.
Oh no!
Or people you don't recognize in someone else's loved one, and you're able to describe them. It's pretty hard to say imagination when you've never met them. But it becomes intrusive for some of us.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's different when you're pulling forward loved ones, because you're very gifted to be able to do that, than finding an energy maybe that's trapped here. But in answer to your question, I think the odds are a lot better out your neck of the woods than over here. For example.
Yeah, I mean, what I was meaning was, the people who
mindset.
Always their mindset is it must be something spooky. They're not spiritual mediums who are doing it. They're just people. And you think, are you looking for the supernatural when it's just the natural? And is your first reaction to say, it's from the other side, and without thinking, well, that could be a logical thing. It's, you see people now putting up photographs saying, look at these orbs. I've taken a photograph. No, there's a very long, boring technical reason, but it's something to do with lens flare and the
flare and dust and the cotton in our clothes and the carpeting and the forced air heating and
moisture.
I mean, we've got
100 scientific reasons.
We've got a small Chihuahua dog here, very thickly coated, and when the light catches, it doesn't matter where it is, you just see these hairs floating past it.
Floating all over top of the dog.
With no good taking a photograph in this house, you'd see.
When that became
all these things zooming past.
When that became big, Charles, was when moms started having these video monitors. And because what we see mostly is people's children, baby monitors, footage of all this activity in their bed when the child's in the crib, and I don't want to break their hearts, especially if they have someone who's passed, like a dad or a mom, and there's that hope and that, is it my mom? And I'm just like,
it's really tough sometimes. I mean, our security cameras, we've been out of this house, let's say, for 4 months. Nobody's in the house, And we know it's haunted. I mean, doors will open by themselves, all kinds of things, especially back then. There was just anything could happen. No forced air. It's all boilers. So it's all radiators. There's nothing, nobody walking, nobody existing. All of a sudden your camera goes off and there's an orb as big as your head just sitting there going, coming out of the mirror and just wandering off to another room. And we're just like, okay. We'll report that one.
That's definitely an orb without a doubt, right? When you have these child monitors, you're seeing and I always say they're consistently shaped and they have this light reflection. And there's things that you can look at. And I don't ever want to tell them it's not, because like I said, people look for some kind of sign from their loved ones. But if it's something that they're afraid of, then of course I come straight out. I'm like, well, listen, you have forced air.
Yeah.
And you've got this, because theirs is always, well, it's moving. Yeah, but you have a vent in that room. It's going to move.
The best ones are the camping pictures.
Camping is crazy because of all the pollen.
You're sitting there around a fire with all the pollen coming down in June and July.
We get a lot of them.
It
looks like it's raining. I'm like, no,
You're
actually,
okay,
it looks
I
like
promise.
it's pollen. I'm allergic to that stuff. I can spot it a mile away.
No, exactly.
No.
But you see, like, your experiences, what prompted you now to just decide, because it's far beyond paranormal. I mean, this is like, it's supernatural, it's interdimensional, like all of these things that you research is just so vast. And you seem to be able to, like, you've investigated a lot. So I'm going to let you decide where you want this show to go, because like when this goes live, there's going to be millions of people listening. So I want to make sure that you get exactly what you want to get out there.
Right. Well, I suppose we've talked about the house, and there was one recurring experience I had in my bedroom, and I would be, we're talking pre-teenage years to early teenage years, and there was this repeat sensation that something was shaking the bottom of the bed. It's one of those beds, single bed, obviously, as a kid, with a sort of board at the top and a board at the bottom to keep the mattress in. Right. And it was if somebody got hold of the bottom of the mattress, of the board at the bottom of the bed, and gave it a tug. And it was just that sensation that you felt yourself being pulled. Wow. And it was enough to sometimes wake me up. And I remember asking my parents about it, and my father was always very practical, said it would be the wind hitting the side of the house, which I could accept because the house did jut out from the property line from the other properties. So, wind coming along, and say we were down by the seafront, so you'd exposed and hitting the side of the house, and you would get that. But it was only many, many years later, when we were clearing out the room, I'd left home by then, and we were changing it around, that I realized that the bed, if it was being hit by the wind, the bed would have surely shaken me from side to side, not from end to end.
Right.
Because the wind couldn't have done that. It wasn't possible to have shaken it that way.
And you're older, so you have more of a logical mind.
Yeah, and you think, well, that doesn't make sense. How did that happen? So although as a kid it was happening to me, but I was accepting that it was nothing mysterious. It was just the wind. Later, I thought, hang on, that doesn't make sense. There must have been some other force, something else doing it, but I don't know what. So I sort of grew up with that, and then teenage years, we were very much into ghosts and ghoulies and spooky things, and we'd go off on our bikes and later in our old cars and go to haunted places to see if anything was happening. And
so
at Scarborough, there's a huge big headland, and on the top of that is a very old medieval castle. And
we have a Scarborough here too, but there's no medieval castles. Just saying.
There's no castle.
And there's a legend that if you climb on the castle walls, the ghost of Piers Gaveston, who was a character who I think he was the favourite of either Edward II or Richard II, but I say medieval prince. He was imprisoned there, and there's this long-term rumour that if you try and walk along the walls, the ghost will try and push you off. So, of course, naturally,
we're all lining up.
So would I.
Teenagers go to the pub and let's go to the castle and see if the ghost will push us off the wall.
That is a great combination.
Brilliant.
What could possibly go wrong?
What could possibly
Eat, drink,
go wrong?
Be merry, get pushed off the top of the castle.
Yeah, not be able to pick yourself back up.
Yeah, exactly. Must be true.
Well, I have to say, for the first time, I'm hoping that neither of you's got this experience. So you didn't lose anybody at the castle?
No, we didn't. But I say I did that, and then I went to university, and with a friend who we all rented a house together, we used to go out ghost hunting. And I'll tell you about some of the incidents later. But then basically, after I'd graduated and eventually I became a lawyer, life got in the way, paying the mortgage, paying the bills, everything else.
Yeah.
And so all those activities rather got put on hold until about 10, 15 years ago, I was able to get away a bit more from the day job and was able to once more start pursuing the interest. So, I started off interested in it, but then life got in the way and then I returned to it. Not least because, of course, back when I was a student, you really couldn't make a living doing anything to do with the supernatural. It was way before all the current, most haunted type TV shows had even been thought of. It was way before podcast, video, anything of that nature.
Right.
And, you could do it as a hobby, but, it sort of rather faded out as an interest. So I say I had this big interest at the beginning, then it rather faded with life, and now it's come back, and I can, devote myself to it, or devote myself to that and various other projects. But that. Right. So I say I went to university called Leeds, in the north of England.
And it's very well known here.
Yeah. Oh,
it's
right.
very well known here, Leeds.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we used to go out on ghost hunting, and I think we can safely say we checked out everywhere where there were no ghosts and confirmed that there wasn't a ghost.
I know.
Long hours sitting around graveyards with flask of coffee and
nothing.
And the other guy with a camera with a lens on it, hoping to catch something, and we saw nothing.
But, were you looking though? Were you really looking?
Yeah, we were.
Okay.
We went to all these places, and we even did. There's a thing called the St. Mark's Eve ritual. St. Mark's Eve, not ritual. Anyway, St. Mark's Eve. It'll come to me in a second. Funny how the word goes.
It's okay.
Yeah. Anyway, the idea was you would. The story was that on St. Mark's Eve, between the hours of 11 o'clock at night and 1 in the morning, if you sat in the porch of your local parish church, you would see the ghosts, really, I suppose they'd be doppelgangers of all the people who in the coming year would die and be buried in that churchyard, go walking past.
Wow.
And there was even a suggestion that if you saw somebody go into the church but then come back out again, that meant they were going to have a very, very serious illness.
Oh,
and,
wow.
a near death experience, but they'd get over it.
Right.
And obviously the last thing you wanted to be doing there is seeing yourself go past into the church. That's really not good news.
No, that wouldn't have been good.
And I say there's accounts of the St. Mark's Eve ritual going back to the 17th century of, quite long detailed accounts of people who, they'd all sit there in the church porch and see the phantoms go in and go out. And, it was in the north of England and over towards Lancashire, what's the other side of the north of England. It was a strong tradition that this was something that was real and happened. And I say we actually went to a St. Mark's church and conducted a St. Mark's Eve ritual sitting there. And I say we saw nothing, but again, it was basically a schoolboy error, because we hadn't realized that church, although it was surrounded by a graveyard, it was no longer in use, so nobody would be buried there anyway. But
right.
Wrong place.
But yeah, you still have all the old ones,
Yeah.
Those are usually the more restless ones.
It's very spooky, because it was one of those old Victorian churches where Leeds was an industrial city, and everything's black, and all the tombs have all got that black pattern from where the stone's been attacked.
Yeah.
So I say that we did that. We also went out to a place where the ghost was one of the few people in English history who had, now jumping over to your side of the world, Giles Corey of the Salem witchcraft trials.
Yes.
You're familiar with him. He was the one who refused to plead, so they squashed him to death, crushed him to death, which was the same punishment in England if you refused to enter a plea. He had quite clearly from the accounts, a nervous breakdown and attempted to kill his wife, killed one of the servants, and stabbed to death 2 of his children, and then tried to ride away, but his horse fell down a hole and he was caught. And he was arrested, and he realized that if he pleaded guilty, then his property would have been forfeit, and his wife and his surviving child would have been made homeless, and everything had been taken by the state. But if he remained silent, then it wouldn't happen. So he was crushed to death with this method. I think it's called pane forte. They put a big board over you and then put more and more weights on you. And he died there, but he was said to haunt his old property. And there's a very detailed account of, there was a school there in later years of schoolboys in the 19th century doing a sort of black magic ritual outside the church and dancing widdershins, reverse order, round their caps they put on the ground and calling on the ghost to turn up. And supposedly something did turn up and scared them so much they all ran away and abandoned all their bags and their caps there. And so there's been this tale that these woods around the church and around where the guy used to live were haunted. So again, we stalked out that place, but sadly nothing. But,
wow. Maybe you just needed to get out there and start chanting.
Well, that's it. Yes.
When in Rome.
Yeah.
No, I don't recommend that ever for anybody listening. Yeah. I'm just playing. So people take it pretty literal. Have to be careful.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
Right.
So I say, we looked at, various spots like that, and I say, sadly, didn't find anything.
Wow.
But
2 for 2.
2 for 2. I did then move down to London, and when I was at law school there, and do you recall, not necessarily personally, but you may well have seen it on the showing late night on television, there's a Hammer horror film called Dracula AD 1972.
I do know it.
Yeah.
I do know it.
Yeah.
I'm a Dracula fan.
I'm not surprised.
Sorry,
she loves anything Dracula, so yeah.
Yeah. It's actually a very good one because it's got Peter Cushing as Dracula. It's got Christopher Lee as Dracula, and it's also got Peter Cushing as relative of Van Helsing.
Van Helsing.
Yeah. Oh, I have to see that.
Yeah. There's also one of Mick Jagger's ex-girlfriends. It's one of the vampire girls in it, and there's lots. It's
Jerry Hall. I think it was
it was
another one before that. Bianca something. I don't know. I can't remember it.
Yeah. There's so many.
So many of them.
Hard to keep up. Oh, Mick.
Yes, that was something, digressing. I read this week that makes you feel old. They're having their 60th anniversary tour this year.
I could have sworn their last one was the last one.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's why we all bought tickets in Toronto, was because the last one was the last one.
Right. Wow.
It's great that they can do it.
It's a bit like Tina Turner, isn't it? She's had about 3 farewell.
But I love Tina. Nobody can
They
touch
all do
Tina.
it. They all do the farewell tours and farewell again, and
the Stones
farewell again. And
they have their own legacy, and I think they should keep going if they can. Why not?
Yeah. Anyway,
yes,
we digress. But to say, it's a good example of sort of swinging 60s Carnaby Street made into a horror movie.
I need to watch that.
And now that was actually inspired by an incident in London called the Highgate Vampire.
I remember it. I know it very well.
Earlier, where there were reports of vampire activity in Highgate Cemetery. Yeah. And Highgate Cemetery is in 2 parts. There's a modern-looking part that's well kept, the bit that's got Karl Marx buried in there, and then there's the other side of it, which is very spooky, and certainly in the 1970s was completely overgrown, and they've got long catacombs, and it is just dripping in spooky atmosphere.
Right.
Very creepy looking place. And this was where this vampire was supposedly seen, and it became sort of a 15 minutes of fame overnight sensation with on one particular, I think it was May Eve, there was a mass invasion of people into the cemetery at night to look for the vampire. Lots of chaos and lots of vandalism and everything else. But there was a serious side because tombs had been opened and taken out.
That's terrible.
And and some of these supposed vampire hunters were staking them. However, I went down there during the daytime, and it was after all this excitement had gone down, and we found a tomb that had been recently opened, and the corpse inside say it would have been 19th century, so it was really just bones,
Mm-hmm.
had been beheaded, and a stake had been driven into its bones, and then it had been set on fire. So,
oh my gosh,
there sort of always has been this thing about whether it was just people jumping on the bandwagon and going there, or whether there was a serious black magic group, occultists, who were carrying out not so much vampire hunting as necromantic activities in there.
Yeah,
that's terrible.
Yeah, so that was quite a scary thing, because it was spooky enough in daylight, this place.
Oh, sure.
And we sort of saw this tomb, and it was open, and the lid was off, and it was above the ground, and we sort of peered in, and oh my God, there's a body there. So
wow, yeah, that'd be a little bit much.
It was.
Right.
I say, it sort of brings it home to you that there are magic practitioners out there, who are doing their own thing, and the fact that it's the 20th century, now the 21st century, doesn't stop them. The fact they're still doing rituals of the sort that go back hundreds of years. And I say, the Hammer horror movie is based on the same thing, that they break into a churchyard and they try to bring up a body, and lo and behold, they get Dracula, who comes along and says,
happens to be in
Highgate. Thank you for all the fresh meat.
Oh no, for sure. There's still stuff that surfaces. There's still articles surfacing about Highgate. It's just something that just will not get put to bed. I think it's just maybe that people still wishful thinking, still go looking. There are people who researched it who still write about it. There's a lot of bickering about it. It's very controversial.
Yeah, there were two investigators who really basically made their life's career on that. And one of them, David Farrant, he died about 5 years ago.
And then there's Sean Manchester, I believe.
Yes, Sean Manchester's still around. And so it's one of those things that's lived on a lot longer than it probably would have done.
Yes.
In other
Do you think it should, like in situations like that, just because of the vandalism and such? Do you think you need to let sleeping dogs lie, or do you think it's just good for tourism to keep this stuff going, or like you say?
I think it'll fade away. I mean, Farrant's now dead, so he's not squabbling with Sean Manchester. And I think it'll just naturally fade away. I mean, that particular area of the cemetery is still controlled, and you can only go there with a tour guide, I think, an official guide.
Which is good.
That's good.
Try and stop. Because unfortunately, with all of these things, once something happens, you get the copycat.
And it always, even in crime.
It's true.
Happens. And there's been other sort of desecrations of churches and things, and there may well have been originally some occultists involved, but they're obviously then scared away when the publicity starts. But then everybody else starts to jump in on it and start.
I agree. I think it goes on all over UK, Europe. I mean, you're getting into occult roots or magic. People kind of giggle, say, "Oh, magic." They don't look at it traditionally as a very old practice that goes on in some of the oldest families throughout the world who have this knowledge. It's not something that should be trifled with.
No, exactly. I mean, I don't think we probably practice magic like you see on TV shows where the magician has flames coming from the fingertips.
Yeah, no, but, Merlin. Thank you.
Yes. But I think it may well be that we discover that magic is a bit like telekinesis and some of these other psychic forces that we don't really understand and which still gets treated by, in quotes, serious scientists as a pseudoscience, and they just don't take it seriously enough.
Right.
But, all of these strange powers that some people possess, I think, people can influence physical objects. I think magic will eventually be discovered to be something of that nature. It's a natural force that we haven't yet really understood,
right,
and don't recognize yet as something serious. But it is actually something it is actually a real force
that's happening. Yeah. It is fascinating for sure. So you come in and did you guys personally go and check out Highgate, or is that just you figured, we don't want to look for a vampire? It could be dangerous. What did you guys do?
We thought, we'll go and look for a vampire. But
so you did, yeah.
We thought we'd do it in daylight.
Right.
Just in case.
This one he's asleep. No.
According to Lord, yes. Wouldn't that be, or Twilight, whichever one.
I know.
It's because they're still out in the day in Twilight, but they sparkle, whatever. But would it be difficult to spot one unless you're going through caves or, I don't know, haunted mansions like where Michelle lives, and maybe their basements, you'd have a better chance. If you look at Hollywood or even folklore, they always live so grandly because they're said to have lived for hundreds and hundreds of years. So that's a lot of accumulative wealth. So of course, you have these big mansions. So did you start hunting mansions?
No, we didn't. No, they have enough wealth that they can make sure people like me don't come in. And of course, now they've all jumped on the bandwagon with ghost hunting, and a lot of these mansions and old hotels and things make a considerable part of their money on hosting ghost hunting.
Yes. It's quite the livelihood for them.
It is. It's a source of revenue. Going back to my hometown, there's a big hotel there called the Grand Hotel, huge edifice, and that's long been reported to be haunted. But it now, one of its main sources of revenue is, monthly ghost hunting weekends.
It's huge. Yeah.
Yeah, it's big business, and so it's changed things. And whereupon once upon a time you could say to somebody, "Do you mind if we have a look around?" They'd say, "Fine." Now it's how much are you going to pay us? And exactly.
Yeah. And if you're a team, in some places, I know in North America, it could be a couple of $1,000s to be in just overnight.
Oh yeah.
So
that's big business.
It's kind of scary too, though, when you think of it, because you think about the activity that stirred up from a previous group when you come in. Was it always there, or is it something they conjured in? Or it's hard to validate any of that.
Well, you've also got the thing with if you have a group of people there, some of them are going to be, if you like, jokers, and they go, "What's that?" And if you've got a group of people together, you get a sort of group dynamic, and everybody gets nervous together or excited together or whatever. And again, are they sensing things that aren't actually there at all, but as a group, they've worked themselves up that they do sense there's something there, but it's actually all their pent-up nervous energy.
Well, some tour guides will do that too. I was at a tour in Scotland, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. I didn't think it needed additional theatrics of people trying to, like, part of the tour jumping out at you. They tried to get me a few times, and I'm nervous of steel. I just sat there and I went, "Thank you, though." Yeah. And he's like, oh, I was like, no.
Yeah, I startle easy. I would have fallen off my heels. I startle easy.
It's believed that by shocking somebody, like a shock scare, that from what they told me, it goes, actually, all we're trying to do is, it's supposed to have us release something like pheromones or something that will attract. It changes your energy somehow, and it would attract things to come towards you. I said, I understand what you want to do now.
That's the oxytocin.
I'll do my best.
Great.
But yeah.
How about no?
But the history and the ghost stories and the spirits around.
Yeah.
And, having mediumship abilities, you can pick up. It's all around.
Yeah.
But this was the theory. But I think instilling that is leaving their own imprints.
Exactly. And I mean, the point is they are now doing it as a commercial operation, and they want to make money. And the way you make money is you keep the customers happy. Absolutely. And they then go home and tell other people, it's really good. And you get more customers. So the whole sort of element of ghost hunting has changed from, if you like, when we were doing it, we were very much amateur, old school ghost hunting. And it's now become a business. And both the venues and the people doing it are doing it, and the equipment.
Yeah.
And again, the equipment, some of the equipment they use, ghost boxes and things of that.
You have to look at his
dodgy.
toys.
What is the science behind it? And
right. But then you're getting into parapsychology, which is more of even parapsychologists in 100 years of working on it have never come up with anything concrete. I think you have to look at it when people say, we use scientific equipment. No, man, you're not in a laboratory laboratory. This is tools of the trade. Maybe is that a better way to put it, but
it's not scientific.
No, but I mean, some of it comes with interesting results, but is it definitive? I don't think anything is definitive.
Well, I mean, they can't, most of them, the results can't be replicated. If you're going to a place that's haunted, then presumably if you go one day and you see a ghost, then supposedly, or, feel a presence. If you went another day, you'd also feel a presence, or somebody with the same equipment, or, the same makeup of group, perhaps with a spirit medium or something with them, clairvoyant, would be able to replicate it. But you never see that. It's just sort of the one-off. So I think the sort of commercialization of it is actually undermining the credibility of it. And I suppose, it's counterproductive. You make money in the short term, but long term, you're discrediting the whole concept of ghost hunting.
I agree with you. I do agree with you for sure. I think it depends on the location. I also know, spending a couple of decades doing spirit research, that if you have a spirit who's stuck, a genuine spirit who is stuck, not residual, they're still people. Like emotionally with their hangups and their baggage. If they don't trust you, if you're just a stranger in that space, they're not gonna interact with you at all. Places like here, it's almost like clockwork because the spirits have always been here. They're not stuck though either. So, the house is built for her. She loves it. She comes back and she's very interactive. So they trust you. They're used to you. They're liable to calm down enough to. We've had film crews here, and we've had coins drop from the ceiling in front of like 6-7 people. We're just like, that was cool. but we don't say, hey, can you do that again? But it happened like 3,
it's not a circus act.
In a row.
Yeah.
So there's always somebody in that film crew that they really liked and just, acted out for because never happened before, never happened after. But they caught it 4 times in a row. Nobody upstairs. 8 people, 6-7 people are sitting there going.
Do you ever wonder where they get these coins? And just
laying in a corner somewhere. I don't know.
No, I'm just curious. Like they're just.
Yeah. No, but, I mean, there was a home I worked at, was very old on Lake Huron, and they would drop coins from like the early to mid 1800s when the house was built. Big pennies and things like that. So I don't know, but I do think if you're dealing with a genuine spirit and not, an imprint or a replay residual, that they would have to build a trust level with you as well. And if you're going in there, all these different people are coming in all the time, I don't know necessarily that people are always going to get those repeated results like you're talking about. I think you have to build that up like anything.
Well, it's like Amelia said, it's not a circus act, and it's not a circus show. And as you say, if you are dealing with an entity you can interact with, it's going to, interact like you and I would interact.
I think
if somebody
so too.
thought the other one was playing them along and not taking them seriously,
absolutely,
the trust would be gone, and there'd be no genuine interaction. You as you say, that they're human beings, were human beings, and they have the same emotions as living human beings.
I agree.
Same responses.
This was a bed and breakfast, so they asked, they come spend the night and film. We're like, sure. It's a B&B, man, whatever. So, and they would have, experiences. We would always say, I'm not going to guarantee if you're coming here for an experience, there's no guarantee you're going to get an experience. Most of the time they would, or people would just hear things walking around and things like that. It was never anything that dramatic, so I'm glad they captured what it is that they wanted. It was actually a comedy that filmed here. Because they like the surrounding of the house, right?
You should send them the clip.
I know. Oh, they have all of it. Yeah, it's just like, but you're here to film a comedy just because the house is very unique and it's the way it looks and the way it's decorated, and it was just like, what? Nobody's laughing now, I bet. But whatever. But paranormal is a different breed of its own. But I also especially like how it, like with your opinion, do you think that paranormal is associated with cryptids and ufology? Because there's that theory now that's floating around that you're reading a lot more about it. They figure everything somehow joins together. Paranormal activity stems from, let's say, contact with UFOs or extraterrestrials, or cryptids are actually, well, some believe they're extraterrestrials. People believe they just come through dimensionally speaking. I am fascinated about the Wold Newton Triangle for this reason. That you made mention in your blurb at the top of interest, because most triangles have a mix of literally everything.
Yeah. The Wold Newton Triangle is an area of countryside about 10 miles from where I grew up. And again, it's one of those places that didn't think too much of as a child, go up there and go around. But later I started putting together all the pieces and realizing this is just one focal point of weirdness going on there. Okay. I mean, the thing that started it off was when I was young, we were driving back, thing you used to do in the 1950s, when, you go out in the car with your parents on a Sunday afternoon, and go somewhere. And we were driving back through there, and we passed an old pub inn on the side of the road. And my mother commented that during the Second World War, the Women's Royal Army Corps, they were the women who did behind the lines support work for the military that previously men had done, and the men were at the front. So these were, people driving lorries and trucks and things.
Right.
They were given special permission that at night they could use a detour, which would have added 20 miles to their journey, to avoid going past this house because it had a reputation for being haunted. And what struck me sort of later on thinking about it was, there's a war on, petrol was rationed, and yet somebody high up in the military thought it was important enough that people weren't made to drive past this spooky place. So it got me thinking about it and, digging into it. And this particular property still standing, but it's always had bad luck. Whoever owns it can't make a run of a business. It's been pubs, it's been cafes, it's been mini hotels. Whoever has it, they last 2 or 3 years, and then they give up and sell it and somebody else gets it. So it's a sort of real bad luck house. And then, you think, well, that was intriguing. And then I started looking at other stories and other elements and realized that we did actually have this triangle bordered on one side by a road and on the other two sides by the sea with a large headland. And despite the fact this is a rural area, and probably there are less people living there now than there were 100 years ago, because obviously farming is a lot less labor intensive than it used to be in those days. Mm-hmm. There is such a mass of folklore, ghost stories, weird occurrences happening there that you think this place really needs to be better known. There's tales of fairy folk going back to the Middle Ages. There's this huge stone monolith at a little village called Rudston, which is this enormous big stone, and it's actually next to a parish church now. But it's huge, and it's taller than any of the stones at Stonehenge. And in its heyday, heyday, it would have been even standing even taller than it is. There's a lot more now that's sunk beneath the ground than there was, and the churchyard's built up over centuries, so it's not as imposing as it would have done. But once upon a time, it was erected about the same time as Stonehenge. So you're talking, 2000 BC, so 4,000 years ago. Yeah. This would have been this huge, great big stone standing there in the middle. And, analysis of the stone reveals that it was dragged a very long way to get there. And it would have had to be dragged because there were no rivers and it's on the top of a hill, so you couldn't float it there or anything. And then there's earthworks. There are remains of what are called wood henges, which are like Stonehenge, but they were made with wood, which sort of modern archaeological testings can show where the wooden pits were. All the ghost stories, and it really was this focal point for a ritual landscape. There were hundreds upon hundreds of burial mounds there, tumuli, barrows. A lot of them have been destroyed by farming because, again, these were going back 3,000 years. So there's a lot of time for them to go. Some of them still remain, or the stumps of them still remain. And they were massive, and they were burials of high-profile people because, the grave goods found in them and so on. Wow. So this area that was a relatively unpopulated area, people were wanting to be buried around there. So there was this magical feeling going way, way back there. And at one end of the triangle, there's a area called Star Caul, which used to be marshland. And archaeologists have found remains of a lake village and woodworkings going back 10,000 years. And they found musks of they're called deer frontlets, and basically it's the skull of a deer, and the horns are slightly sawn down, and a couple of eyes are bored in the front of the skull, and they're worn as a mask so you can see through them. And it's obviously some kind of shamanism or
Druidism, maybe.
Before the Druids, long time before the
Oh,
Druids.
wow.
That's
long time
fascinating.
before that. But possibly people wanting to get into the spirit of the animals they were going to hunt, because deer was, source of meat, source of sinew for sewing things together, source of fur for making clothes and so on. Possibly that. But a huge pile of them have been found. So again, there was, shamanistic magic taking place here 10,000 years ago. And it sort of just continues. And I say, you just keep digging out, and then you find something else, and then you find something else. And, there's recently been an archaeological dig, and they found a Bronze Age. So that's about 2,000 years ago, before the Romans came over, chariot burial.
Wow.
And they've discovered that when it was originally built, from the positioning and the bones and of the horses, it would have looked as if these horses, dead horses, were rising out of the ground. The top half of them were rising out of the ground.
Wow.
So there's all of this stuff going on there. And I just found it fascinating. And I say, in later times, there have been a lot of reports of UFO activity around this area.
Right.
And it's just, I say a triangle of weirdness, a sort of ritual landscape. And there's just so many elements of it. And I say that what intrigues me is the fact it just went so far back in time, 10,000 years, and all the way through history. And, there's ghosts now of the Victorian era sort of being reported and so on. And it just is a weird area. And at one point in the 18th century, what was then the largest meteorite ever to land on land in England crashed down to Earth at Wold Newton, which is at the center of all this triangle. And, of all the places, it comes down there. 2 or 3 miles, well, less than that, to the east, it would have landed in the sea and not been seen. But instead, it came crashing down and was recovered. And you can still see it in the Science Museum, I think it is, or the Geology Museum in London. It's still there. This thing. So stuff coming down from the heavens, all these tales, say fairy folk. There's also been a recent excavation. There's a abandoned medieval village there called Warren Percy, and recently they've been excavating the churchyard. And they found that a number of the bodies there had been ritually dismembered, and their they were post-mortem deaths, and their legs had been broken and cut off. Their heads had been cut off and placed between their legs. And it's thought this was the people of the Middle Ages fearing revenants, which was the big thing that would walk. You move the head, and of course you're talking medieval mindsets here.
Yes,
the way you stop the dead walking is you chop off their legs so they can't walk. If you chop off their head and put it in the wrong place, they're just staring down at the ground and they can't see anything.
They can't see.
You bury them face downwards is another way of doing it, so that they can't go backwards. And that they'd found these things here, and I say that it's just intriguing, because it then ties back to all these medieval tales of revenants, which were, I suppose, the equivalent of a sort of a cross between a zombie and a vampire.
Right.
But it was not a spirit type ghost. It was a physical ghost that would come out of the grave and be animated. And I say, it's you read accounts of them in medieval history books, but this was an area where the only logical explanation is that's what was being done to these bodies. There were people who'd probably been villains in their life, and the medieval people had this idea of a bad death. If you had a good death, and you were a good person, and you said your prayers, and you had the last rites, you'd go to heaven. If you had a bad death, you hadn't said your prayers, you hadn't had the last rites, you'd lived an evil life, then you were likely to wander the earth. And say this was a manifestation of it. They were taking precautions. These people might come back to haunt us, so let's deal with them.
There are cemeteries like that throughout Europe. Like it must have been through the medieval ages. Like there's that are archaeologists are starting to discover.
Yeah. And you get a lot of that in the Balkans and the Carpathians, which is one of the sources of the Dracula type stories of vampires. It's the same thing that people don't want these evil people who are evil in their life. They are concerned that they will come back to haunt them in the afterlife. So
taking precautions,
and you read of them. I mean, not far from here, they during the time of Matthew Hopkins, the Witchfinder General, in the 17th century, they found 2 skeletons of women that had been hanged, and subsequently large iron rivets had been nailed through their legs. And again, it was thought that they weren't in a normal churchyard, they were just sort of dumped in a bit of a field somewhere. So again, it was thought these people were executed as witches. As we all know, 99.9% of people executed for witches weren't witches at all. But either way, they were accused of being witches and thought to be witches and executed as witches. And people were therefore frightened that as witches, they would come back from the dead and wreak havoc on the living. And so again, precautions were taken. So, it's one of those things that
whole mindset.
We remain terrified of the dead.
But I think it's still to this day in some cultures, because not much has changed from then. Okay, maybe we don't cut off their legs and their heads, but Christians, the last rites is given whether they are still breathing or not. It's seen as it has to be that way, or they can't enter the gates. And the exploitation of, and I say this all the time because I've actually been to Salem, the exploitation of what happened there, and it continues. The fear of those witches coming back, and it just it's I'm amazed at the last rites ritual for back then, when you were saying even though they cut off their legs and their heads, the last rites to me was always seen as a Catholic rite. I didn't realize that it was something that was done then as well.
Yeah, well, don't forget, going back then, the only church was the Catholic Church.
Okay.
From when Christianity got re-established in Europe in the sort of, in England in the 7th century or so, there was only the Roman Catholic Church, and through until the Protestant Reformation. So all of them were treated that way, royals. And they still then also had the concept of purgatory, sort of a clearing house between going up to heaven or going down to hell. And it was thought in medieval times that the more spiritual type ghost you saw was a spirit of someone trapped in purgatory. And again, when you read some of the medieval books, the ghost is walking, and it's because nobody is saying prayers for it. And it was a big thing that you had people say prayers for you while you were in purgatory, and people would leave money for priests to say prayers for them, for their departed spirits, for some cases hundreds of years. People were, the money was going to the church to say these, and it was a big fear that if people didn't say prayers for you, you'd be trapped in purgatory forever in this limbo. And it's one of those things you have to sort of think not with modern thought patterns, but with what a medieval thought pattern would be. And most people were illiterate. In most villages, probably the only person who could read and write would be the priest, and they had a very black and white view of the world, what was in the Bible.
Authoritarian.
And if it's in the Bible, then it's good. If the information or the knowledge has come from somewhere else, then it's potentially bad. And they had this, fairly harsh view on what it was. And if somebody reported something weird, it was either an angelic manifestation or a demonic manifestation. There was no sort of in betweens.
But it's still like that in the Roman Catholic Church. I mean, I remember, because we've been locked down in this pandemic, I had to contact the church because I lost my father in November of 2020. And I knew that he wanted a mass, like the 30-day mass, the 1-year mass. He did masses for years for my mom. So they still have that belief of praying for the souls, and he set aside things so that I made sure that I have this done for so many years. And we still do it on the anniversaries of our loved ones' deaths, meaning the Roman Catholics. Not that I'm practicing, because my priest would argue if I said I was going to church, he'd be like, yeah, no, you're not. But but I've done things for my father in that respect. So I understand it's still happening, but to a different degree, as you said. It's just a little bit different.
It's a little bit different, and we've got more modern ideas, and we don't immediately now think, "Ooh, it's the work of the devil."
No.
We realize there are other explanations for things that go on, but I say it's this whole culture that they had for so long. It basically dominated Western Europe for over nearly 1,500 years, and all our
unbelievable when you think about it.
Until Protestantism came along, and
it had staying power,
gave a different perspective on it.
All of them,
these views are very ingrained, and you still see people today talking about it. And if you remember the satanic ritual abuse panic of the 1880s. Sorry, 1980s. The 1980s. Huge thing. It was big in the UK as well, in certain parts of the country. And the things people were saying and talking about, it was like the things that the witch hunters 500 years previously were talking about, and nothing had changed, and it was still the work of the devil, and anything to do with witchcraft, they were devil worshippers, and they were sacrificing children, and it was all sorts of stuff, which, like when you read some of the witch trial reports, it's all stuff which you stop and think, and you think, well, that's physically impossible, that couldn't go on, it's just nonsense, but everybody's excited. Oh, it's happening. And the beliefs run through.
It's hysteria when you look back at it, when you see it. And when you go in person to take these tours and learn from them, you see the corruption behind the people and how it was a plot to take land and to give them absolutely no right to anything, because they were told, if you plead innocent, we'll give you, if you plead guilty, we'll take your land and we're done.
Right.
But if you plead innocent, we're going to try you and we're going to hang you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what they did. And
Yeah.
that's what a lot of people need to know, not just the, the Hollywood version or the tourist version because it's making money. I was very fortunate when I went there, and I'll say this quickly because I do have to slip in
we have to do our station and sponsor ID.
Yes. I will do the station ID right now, and then I'll tell you quickly what happened when I was there in Salem. You are listening to The Outer Realm with Michelle DeRoche and myself, Amelia Pisano. Tonight's fantastic guest is Charles Christian, all the way over from the UK. And we are talking weird tales of the UK. And what a great night it is. We're going to have to bring him back several times. Yes, we are. And he is scheduled. So please stay tuned to the end. We are airing pre-recorded right now, but we are live in 105.3 FM radio in the beautiful city of New Orleans, streaming on YouTube's UFO Paranormal International Public Radio, UFO Gods and Extraterrestrials Radio, as well as all of our Facebook pages, including the Outer Realm page, of course, in Canada's most haunted home of Michelle DeRoche. A huge thanks to award-winning composer Dr. Snick, the sonic surgeon, also known as Justin Snicker. For our fabulous intro and outro, you can purchase his music on Amazon, Bandcamp, and you can find Justin on social media platforms such as Facebook and Instagram. And a huge, massive thank you, and I am drinking it in my glass because I brought it up from upstairs, the Folgers coffee. You have been with us from day one, and we would not be here without you. Thank you for sponsoring our show.
Who has British origins, just saying, the Folgers family.
They're from England.
They are from originally from England.
Yeah.
I will be Googling them once we've finished.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
Like shockingly, even though you're a tea drinking country. Yes.
Yeah, and you don't really carry Folgers. We've had British guests go. I'm like, hey, they're British.
They're from England. They immigrated to the US. Yes.
Right. Okay, yes. Amelia, you were saying quickly.
Yes. When I went to Salem and I went to the memorial, because people often are confused about the memorial. They think it's because it's a bury ground, bury point cemetery. They think that's where the witches were hung, the innocent were hung, and they weren't. Who is buried in that cemetery are the people who actually convicted them. Are buried. And the memorial, shockingly, is attached to it and just divided by an iron fence. The iron fence to keep the bad and the evil spirits out, believe it or not. So these stones are placed with their names engraved on them, and you can bring flowers and you can pay your respects to them. And in the threshold, when they did this memorial, they couldn't have done it better than what they did. They did the threshold, and in the threshold are stamped in the last words that were said from each and every victim of that trial, saying, God, forgive me, I am innocent. Please, God, help me. That's what was stamped in the threshold. And when you walk over that threshold and that beautiful memorial, you have shivers, whether you are gifted or not. You have shivers. I went in with a friend. She doesn't have the abilities I have, and you just feel it. So, and then 2 men were hung because one was seen as a witch, and the other man took the place of his pregnant wife, because they wouldn't hang a pregnant woman. If she's a witch, she's a witch, right? This is where we have to start to think, what the hell, instead of, oh, they wouldn't hang a pregnant woman. No, they wouldn't hang a pregnant woman. Why? Because she really wasn't a witch. But they had to kill someone because they had to make her look guilty. Yeah. But why didn't anybody stop? If she was a witch, would you not hang her pregnant or not? Because you'd be afraid of the evil spawn coming through? Okay. That's what I'm saying. Like, for me, I know that a lot of people love the place. I find it exploited because I got to speak. I had the opportunity to speak with someone who used to give tours. He just happened to be there paying his respects, as he always does. And he told me the stories of the way people who live there generally do not like what's going on, because they don't like the exploitation, because their people are not, we're not giving respect to them. And we don't know where they're buried. We know the mound where they are. We know the hill where they are, but they were in a mass grave and no headstones. You can visit that place, but they make it virtually impossible to get to. You have to climb over a fence and go up a hill, just saying, which I did. But anyways, So it's a little bit difficult for me to swallow on this side of the spiritual conversation, like on this side of my work, the field. It's hard for me to go into a place like that and see it as a tour. I don't know. I can't. I go in there as I mourn them.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, you know, it's macabre exploitation. I mean, it's a bit like over here in Europe. You get people who go on a tour around the German death camps and like Auschwitz.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm fully aware of the horrors of it, but that'd be the last place I would consider going as a sort of tourist thing. And, you know, I see posts on Facebook from people saying, you know, we had a slap up lunch somewhere over here. Then we went and saw Auschwitz, and then we went out for a wonderful dinner. And you think, no, this is sort of macabre. You know, it's like people who slow down and gulp when there's a road accident.
Yes. And they take photos of the gas chambers, and I don't understand it either. I think if I had been there, if I ever went, which I'm not, but if I had gone, my intention would be to pay respects and leave flowers and offerings outside, not go in. And as a medium, I would be trying to assist any spirits that needed to be ascended. I would not go in there as a voyeur or as for me, it's horrible. It's horrible.
Yeah. So, I don't see it, you know. It was a huge appalling tragedy. But it shouldn't be then, and it should be remembered. But it shouldn't be treated as a tourist opportunity.
Not a tour.
You know,
that's like saying, here, let's go through all the graves rather than bury our loved ones. Let's just walk through the graves. You know, it's for me, it's the same kind of thing. There's a lot of tragedy, but I do understand the curiosity of the paranormal field looking for it. I do understand that, but there has to be a balance, I think.
Yeah.
You know, you have to have integrity. You have to have respect. There's a lot in there, not just searching for EVPs. Somebody's family was burned there.
Where?
Auschwitz, like somebody's family were tragically killed in those gas chambers. A lot of them were set on fire. They were tossed like nothing into pits. There's a certain amount of respect that needs to be given. There's a lot of history that needs to be remembered so it's not repeated. I totally agree with that. And I believe that there needs to be a story that's being told, but not necessarily in the gas chamber. There's other places for that. There's museums.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know.
Exactly. You don't have to poke around it, as you say, like a voyeur. No. It's disrespectful. Yeah.
I went to the 9/11 memorial, and my intention was to see if I could help ascend any spirits when I went through. I cried so hard going through there. I literally rushed out and couldn't do the tour properly. And I'm against it. But anyways.
Yeah. One of the points you were talking about earlier was the paranormal and the fact it seems to overlap now with cryptids and also UFOs and things like that. And I mean, it's an interesting idea, isn't it? That perhaps, you know, they are connected. I mean, one of the things that I've noticed in my researches is that until the 1950s or so, when UFOs first came along, people were, certainly in England, were still reporting seeing fairies. And there's this long tradition of it. And there's a theory now that perhaps what people in the past saw as fairies, we're now seeing as little green men and grey aliens, and not least because some of the descriptions of fairy folk overlap with some of the descriptions of aliens, and you just wonder whether, UFOs have always been with us, but they've been again misinterpreted. They've been seen as fairy folk, and I say it's an intriguing thing that there may well be a link between all of these elements.
I think if you're looking at different species of extraterrestrials, such as reptilians, for example, is that what people who are experiencing demonic or alleged demonic activity, are they one and the same? Because the characteristics are very similar, right down to having sleep paralysis, which are reported at both, even though there's a scientific explanation. It just seems to be something that is reported at in both scenarios. Appearance, odors, things like that. Same with angelics. I think the term angel and demon is a Christian or Catholic representation, and those in the UFO field will say no, they're reptilians or Palladians or light beings. Like there's just and cryptids. I mean, I think every country in the world has a Bigfoot. Or a water monster, Loch Ness. Are they coming in and out of portals? Because people report them just disappearing.
Yes. I mean, I say it's very intriguing on that, and particularly with the portals, and are ghosts in fact
dimensional bleed through, as our producer.
Joel's favorite
dimensional
words.
bleed through.
Yes.
I wonder.
Well, the best example I heard of it was, it's like you're living in a big apartment block, and you're on your floor, and you can hear things above you, and you can hear things in the apartment below, but you never actually see those people. And is this really what it is, that, the people down below are the equivalent of the ghosts, and occasionally you just catch a glimpse of them maybe, and the people on the above are aliens, and again, we're just catching glimpses of them, and we're all there. But as you say, it's dimensional bleed through, or is it even, another idea of the multiverse, that there's parallel worlds and they cross over? I mean, with fairy lore, there's long been this idea that the fairies live in another world, and that there are places on Earth where, if you like, our realm and their realm are parallel, and there's bleed through and all this stuff about, if you go into caves, you'll find them, that the fairy folk exist in the real world, but it's just buried beneath our world, so it's a fascinating thing. And it all comes down to, you need an open mind on it to explore all the emerging theories. I mean, we were talking about Bigfoot, and everybody's got a Bigfoot. We have one in this part of the world called the woodwoes, or wild man, and
woodwoes. I love
woodwoes. And you see a lot of carvings in churches of woodwoses, and they're a big hairy man, usually carrying a club, and they're often fighting dragons or something.
I love that.
Yeah, they are medieval creatures. They spread then, but where did they come from? And what I find intriguing is that cultures that had no contact with each other have similar legends. So the Yeti from the Himalayas, that was unknown in the West until 100 years ago. Bigfoot, ditto, presumably existed before the colonization of the European colonization of America.
Right.
We've got the woodwoses here. There's similar things. How come these places that are separated by thousands of miles, how come we've all got the same legends? And
the same characteristics, everything.
Yeah, and you're starting to get with archaeology, people are finding that the human family tree is a lot more complicated than we first thought. And it used to be, Neanderthals, and they became extinct. Cro-Magnons, who are us, came along. Now we know there were lots of other species coexisting for a long time. And indeed, us lot Cro-Magnons, Homo sapiens, interbred with the Neanderthals for some time. So, but you've got the Denisovans in Russia. You've got the on the Isle of, was it Flores in Indonesia, the little hobbits, the miniature small people. There's a new excavation going on in China, and they found another hominid that is human-like. So you're suddenly finding it's a lot more complicated, and some of these species lived relatively recently. Certainly, the hobbit in Indonesia are these. The Yeti, Bigfoot, everything else, are they relics of other species that we haven't known? And, they've wisely spotted that the best way to survive when humans are around is to avoid them, because, humans will naturally try and shoot and kill them.
Of course, except for the indigenous who, who have coexisted with these beings. Yeah, it's all throughout their oral history. So why is it that it's just the modern, the modern people who feel they have to hunt these things down and search for them? It's like curiosity, I understand, but we just don't seem to be able to live in harmony with anything. No. Our indigenous of all over the world, the ancients even, all lived in harmony with these beings.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Is it they're not, that they are really our cousins who we haven't been properly introduced to, and they're hiding away from us, and we, it's this thing with paranormal and mysteries. A lot of the things that are mysteries, it's because we don't know the answer. It's not because they don't exist or that they've been made up. It's that we just don't know. We've got missing knowledge. We don't know about them.
That's right.
It's like how did they build the pyramids? And you'll get people saying it was the aliens. No, it was built by humans, but we don't know quite,
kept from us.
Yeah, but we don't know how they did it. But just to say, oh well, it must have been some other magical force. And it's the same with cryptids and the like. They're out there, but we just haven't recognized them and been able to categorize them and put them through the normal scientific process. But that doesn't mean they don't exist. It just means that they haven't been recognized by modern science.
I definitely agree. And unfortunately, we're slowly infringing on the top of the hour. And I want to give you the time to tell people how to find you. You have, your books, upcoming books. We have you scheduled to come back, so there's going to be a lot of opportunity to catch up. I can't wait already. So this is the part of the show where you get to promote yourself and bring people to you.
Right. Well, you can find me on my website and also on social media as Urban Fantasist. And my latest book, which I will try to hold up so you can see it, is this one here. Is. Shuckland,
I love it.
Which is all about
beautiful cover.
Yeah, those ruins are about 10 miles from where I'm sitting.
Oh my gosh, I'm so jealous.
That was a big church tower, and there was once a whole village there, and now there's just those two pillars. Shuckland is available on Amazon, both as print and as an ebook. And my next project, I've just delivered the manuscript to the publisher. So we'll see how it goes. But it is an anthology of witches and sorcerers, but taking it from the historical perspective, right from biblical times through to modern times, and obviously going to a lot of coverage of the Salem trial.
I need to read that.
And I've been putting a lot of historical context into it, and the fact that all these witch hunts were mainly, as Melia was saying, property grabs, and people had vested interests, and it's a recurring theme all the way through with witch hunts. You think somebody's got a somebody's got another motive for why they're doing that. So I say that should hopefully be out probably later this year, but I say the manuscript has only gone in last week.
I can't. Well, we won't have it for the next show, obviously, but possibly the one after that.
For the one after that,
another 2 times, which
yes,
is
indeed,
fantastic. Yeah. Well, I really want to thank you so much for joining us. It was such a pleasure. And we don't often get to do this in the afternoons. We're extremely laid back, which is really nice, because the chat room's not on fire. We have to do that tonight. But yes, the chat room's not on fire. So it really gives us the opportunity, just to make it more like really round table, like we're just hanging out and talking and, not having a whole lot of other questions that we have to tend to. Not that we don't like it, just saying, don't think, we love you all, but this is really nice. So
no, it's been great. It's been lovely talking to you both.
Thank you so much.
It will air this evening, 9 p.m. Eastern time. And I will email you after that, and we'll let you know.
Indeed. Let me have the links and I will promote them and plug them as much as I can.
You were such a joy, and I learned so much. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. No, it's been a delight talking to you.
Thank you. So until the next time, but I will be in touch later on.
Yes, indeed.
You have an email my morning.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Shall I click the leave button now?
Please.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Have a good evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye, Charles.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, we have come to the end of another fantastic segment. So thank you all. Thank you all. I'm thanking you all for tuning in, because we're going to be in chat with you guys tonight. And it's going to be a whole other party. Yes, it will. So big thank you to Charles Christian. It's just delightful. He has so many different things to talk about. He is coming back on for those who really enjoy the show. We have him coming back on June 22nd, and he is scheduled again for later in the year. So just for those of you who want to catch up with him again, June 22nd is the next date. And honestly, we just touched on a smidge of this man's knowledge and his stories. So look forward to more amazing stuff coming from Charles Christian. Big thank you to Folgers Coffee. Couldn't do it without you as always. A huge thank you, Dr. Snick, aka Justin Snicker. We love and appreciate you as well. Remember to stop by UFO Paranormal Radio, subscribe, but get a membership, guys. You guys are going to have a lot of stuff you're going to miss otherwise. Even stuff from Amelia and I. We've been talking about doing some extra stuff that you're only going to see as a member. If you'd like to communicate with us, please only on the Outer Realm contact at gmail.com, the Outer Realm contact at gmail.com. It is too difficult to man all of this personal social media and all the group pages. This is the best way to get us. So please consider that. Tomorrow night, we welcome for the very first time, Dr. Scott Taylor, who is an experiencer of, get this, because I've never heard of it, a shared NDE. So you're not going to want to miss that. A shared NDE. So tonight we will see you in chat. And I thank you in advance for tuning in, since we won't be able to do it via live radio. So we will see you guys in chat room probably around, I would say we'll probably be on time this time. So it should be around 9:10 ballpark. Thank you.